The world is a weird place, and when you're a truck driver, sometimes truck stops can be the scariest place on earth. The weirdest things happen at truck stops, from weird people to prostitutes. You hear singing, and then it turns into screaming. You think somebody's trying to kill you, and all you're trying to do is make a paycheck. I'm Zach Halcox, and this is 7 scary truck driver stories on the Infiltrators Scary Stories. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free, and there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your own podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will then distribute your podcast for you so you can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need in a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Number 1. I parked beside a cemetery and was scared half to death. Pulled over for a break on the way to Melbourne from Sydney, Australia, at a truck stop. No street lights or anything. Pitch black. No other trucks or cars at the stop. I turned my lights off. I switched the truck off. Do the curtains. Lock the truck from both sides. Jump into bed. Set my alarm and set my phone above me in the compartment. I was rolling around from side to side for around 5 to 10 minutes. I couldn't get to sleep due to it being prime summer temperatures, reaching around 30 degrees at night. I'm looking up at the ceiling, mentally planning out my day ahead. Suddenly, the passenger door opens up slightly. The cabin lights come on. What the fuck? Now, the truck is a fairly late model and in pristine condition, so there's no question about the door being faulty or anything. I just sat there for what felt like an eternity, expecting someone to come up and see me sitting there, with the solid rod in my hand that we use for tightening belts. No one came up, nor was there any noise at all. I just heard quiet, eerie silence. I grabbed my torch and jumped down, walked around the truck. No other trucks were around, nor were there any cars. It was just me and my fully loaded B double. Around 5 or 10 minutes of getting fucked around with, I locked up and went to bed again. Woke up the next morning, yawned, fixed myself up along with the bed, opened the curtains, and FML. There's a cemetery next to where I stopped. Hunger and laziness all escaped upon realization. Grabbed keys, didn't put my shoes on, didn't even put my pants on. Switched the truck on and just got out of there as soon as possible. Number 2. He had no idea how his truck got from one place to the next. My boyfriend is a truck driver who routinely does night runs. Oddly enough, I asked him this question myself a few days ago. He told me that one night he was getting ready to park in a lot next to a truck stop. He said it looked like there was no lights on, no cars, no sign of anyone, but he said, screw it. He was tired. He woke up the next morning, parked on the side of the road, with 3 highway patrol vehicles behind him. He was about 15 miles from the truck stop he had parked at. Thing is, he was sleeping in the cabin the whole time. He has no idea how he got from one side of the road, and the logic says someone tried stealing the truck and succeeded. And the police convinced him of this happening as they saw a man in a black jumpsuit running away from his truck into a nearby field. Even then, he still feels uneasy about the whole situation. Apparently, the doors were still locked from the inside, and there was no real sign of anyone trying to break in. Number 3. An invisible person started shaking the truck. My brother was a truck driver in the 90s/early 2000s. He just told me this story a few months ago. He was driving through Pennsylvania on the way back to New Jersey. He pulled over the side of the road behind 2 other trailers. In the early morning, he heard someone banging on his right door. He quickly jumps up from the sleeping compartment and grabs his bat. As he looks out the window, there's no one. There's nothing there. There's nothing out the window. There's no one at all. There's no one. And then a bang on the left side. He freaked out and looks out the window. And there's nothing but silence now. He's trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. Seconds later, banging on both doors simultaneously. He said the banging was so loud and heavy the truck was shaking. Both curtains open. He can see there's no one out there. He quickly jumps in the driver's seat and starts the truck. He sees the other 2 trucks ahead of him doing the same thing. He said he felt as if they all had experienced the exact same thing. Number 4. He was robbed while sleeping in the bed of his own truck. This is actually one I can answer due to my father having been a truck driver for over 30 years. He is currently in the hospital due to back problems. There might be a connection. Mind you, this story might have happened 15, maybe 20 years ago. It's a retelling of retelling. I might even go back and edit certain parts if I recall something different, but I'll do my best to summarize. One night, as my father was trying to catch a few hours of sleep in the bed of his truck before having to, kind of illegally, drive a few more hours than he was supposed to due to time constraints and bad traffic all day, he heard little bumps from the outside, like a raccoon trying to get into a metal shed. So his first thought was simply, it probably was just a raccoon. But then things turned a bit creepy. He started hearing more noises, and finally, some mumbling from outside. Clearly, no raccoon, but a couple of guys, maybe 2 to 3. Fully convinced this wasn't just an animal, my father tried to get up, but simply couldn't. It was like he was mentally all there, but his muscles weren't responding. It wasn't anything like sleep paralysis, though. Turns out, those guys put a little rubber tube through the truck's little skylight, which was like tilted up slightly for some fresh air while sleeping, and poured some kind of knockout gas or something like that into the truck's cabin. Barely conscious, he could barely do anything but just lay there and watch as two men entered the cabin after fiddling around with the lock for a few more minutes. They took all they could to find. But after that, both company and private phone, his wallet, and even his shoes. Something that I personally find most terrifying. One of these thieves was searching everything thoroughly. He gave my dad a complete pat-down. Pockets of his shirt and pants, under his pillows, basically anywhere someone might hide something valuable. Personally, that would have freaked me out the most. And the most interesting part about this story is that he told me about it as if it were just a thing you gotta go through when being a truck driver. And this story in particular isn't too rare out there, he said. He also told me a ton of horror stories from other drivers, but I wanted to keep it in the family for this one. Maybe another day. Number 5. A woman got decapitated by the wheels of his truck. Like most people on here, this didn't happen to me. One of my good friends from middle school had a stepfather who was a truck driver for a good amount of time. He was a tough son of a bitch. I never saw him not look like he was going to kill somebody. Except one time, when he told us why he stopped driving trucks. He was on a long trip from somewhere down in Texas to Boise, Idaho. By the time he hit the freeway close to Boise, he had already been up for 24 hours. Either way, I didn't believe he could have seen this coming. Outside of Boise, he was driving late at night at the fastest legal speed when out of nowhere, he sees someone sit straight up in the middle of the road. He didn't even have enough time to even hit the brakes. Not that it would have helped. She was decapitated on the spot. He later found out she was tweaked out. I don't even think, even if he was asleep deprived, he would have been seeing her laying there. From what the police could gather, she walked out there, sat down, eventually fell asleep in the road. No one knows who she was or how she got out that far. Number 6. He woke up to the sound of singing that turned into screaming. I have a truck driver from the extended family. An uncle used to drive a lot, and he always came back with the most weirdest stories ever. While every family member knew his stories, there was one story he told and warned about. Even to me when I was 6 or so. Moral of the story is just never stay during night in the desert alone. It seems once he drove to Chile, he had a contract, and the way there was okay. I made the travel myself later in life, and it's beautiful. Whenever he was done, he usually spent a few bucks on booze. But this time, due to a family gathering, he wanted to come back as soon as possible. So instead of drinking in some bar, he decided to sleep a bit at the Atacama Desert. Well, it's a desert. And he had parked way outside the road, a few miles before the next village. He sleeps and wakes up on someone singing. He is confused and thinks it's the radio, but the radio's not on. Then the singing stops, and it sounds more like screaming, like someone was screaming for help. That's when he wants to get out and help, but he is still confused. He said he started the motor and the lights to see where and who was there. Also, he did open the window a bit and yelled, asking what had happened. It was nothing, and right when he decides to get out anyway, he catches a movement in the corner of where the lights end. It looked like a woman, but the face was pitch dark. He freaks out and drives away, nonstop, until he reached home. Whatever he saw or thought he saw, every time he told the story, his face went pale. Even my grandmother commented how he was usually a very jolly guy, and whatever happened to him in the desert freaked him totally out. Number 7. A white car kept following us, and then pointed a gun at us. Also not a truck driver, but have a spooky story. About 3 or 4 years ago, my dad and I took a 24-hour journey to Southern California to McAllen, Texas. This was in late November, around 5 or 6 p.m. Still plenty of light outside. This white car that appeared to be fresh off the lot. No numbers on the plate, just the dealership plates. Started pulling in front of us repeatedly, cutting us off amidst the freeway traffic. The windows were heavily tinted, so you couldn't see who was inside. It was pretty irritating, and they continued to do this. So we sped up and eventually lost them. It began growing dark outside. I was tired and I fell asleep as my dad continued driving. At this point, the freeway was empty. We had passed the major cities in Texas. There was nobody else on the road. I woke up about 1:30 a.m. because I could feel our car alternately speed the fuck up and slowly slow down. I sat up and rubbed my eyes and noticed we were alone on the freeway. But wait, holy shit. Was that same car, the same white car behind us? I look at my dad, who didn't say a word, but he continued driving very seriously. My dad's a very confident driver, macho man type guy. We were going up to 110 miles per hour. This white car would match our speed, then quickly switch lanes and pull right in front of us over and over again. When we'd slow down, they'd slow down. When we sped up, so did they. This is some pretty scary shit, and we're near in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night. Obviously, I'm panicking. I was like 19. Like, what's happening? Are we going to be okay? I don't know what they're trying to do. It's like a game of cat and mouse, my dad says. I guess this has been going on for at least 30 minutes. So my dad decides to end this once and for all. He starts gunning it way fast, close to 117, 120 miles per hour until they're out of sight, which works. He takes the closest exit, pulls off the road. We went under an underpass. He switches off the lights, kills the engine, takes a gun out of his center console, gets out of the car, and just stands there. My dad is very calm. Stoic man, ex-cop, who never shows emotion. I was convinced we were both going to die, or I was going to be brutally kidnapped by the cartel or something. About 2 minutes later, slowly, I hear gravel beneath wheels. My heart freezes, and I see the white car, eerily slow, exit the freeway and turn the corner in the road toward us. The lights shine directly on us, under the overpass, illuminating my dad, firmly positioned, both hands on his gun, pointed directly at them. They just passed us, continued their slow drive down the road toward the gas station. Immediately, we turned the car around and went back to the freeway, booked the hell out of the gas pedal, and never saw them again.